Everybody, welcome to the show. Good
Welcome.
Good morning to you.
Good morning.
You look really pretty, like a model from like Santa Fe or like Albuquerque.
Oh, well, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's a little chilly here, and so you had to pull that. You're still living in a barn, and it's a situation. So
I packed all my sweaters.
yeah,
I didn't. My brain just thought, oh, when it's cold, we wear sweatshirts and puffies.
well, yeah.
I forgot my workplace is a meat locker.
Are
First
you
of
talking about
all,
this room right here?
yes.
Okay, you know what? I reject that. I will tell you right now that if you go over there and you look at the setting, I guess this is the loudest train that's ever passed my home. Is it coming
normal.
into the yard? If you looked at the setting, it would say like 69 degrees. And I want to tell you.
Feel my hand.
Okay, jeez. Well, I'm like an internal heater. I'm a furnace. I thought, why aren't
Anyway.
you?
I do not know.
Okay, anyway.
I wish I could change it.
It's cold in your work environment, which is a sideways passive-aggressive swipe at this studio.
So she's pretty, but she's cold.
Okay, well, I get hot. And when we are interviewing people, and it's such like it's like a mental feat to be a good interviewer, to be listening and pivoting and adjusting and following the conversation and building for the next stage of the interview. Well, it just makes me sweaty.
I understand.
And
Me
so-
too, but I can be sweaty and also freezing.
That's a terrible, terrible statement on our age.
I know. Well,
We have an episode today for anybody who in any way is experiencing a pretty major disappointment in your life. So, I mean, I guess everyone. I think that's everyone.
disappointment is
That's a gentle word, isn't
a
it?
gentle word for her
You're right.
story.
It-
But it is a disappointment and it is an unmet expectation, and everybody can relate to that.
Yeah. This can go from like a really sad disappointment to a shattering. So whether that's like a marriage or a relationship with a friend or a career or anything at all, this is your episode. We are talking to my friend Jessica Turner today about her book. I thought it would be better than this.
Jessica N. Turner.
Jessica N. Turner, thank you. That's going to matter, and you'll see shortly why. But her book is about transformation. And so in a stretch of a segue, let's talk about the Gen X movies that transformed us. The ones that are like, they went in the short list of the ones we made our kids watch, the ones we've seen 400 times, etc. Now, we have a lot to pull from here, because this can run the gamut from like the 80s when we were coming of age, and I'm going to include the 90s when we were young adults.
Okay.
So I'm going to give us a decade, 15 years even, if you will. What you got?
I mean, I loved all those movies. I don't know if I was in the transformation business
Good point.
at that age.
Okay, it's a dramatic word. Let's just say like the one that was like, well, now I've seen everything.
The one that I actually still think about and reference is Say Anything.
Such a good answer.
Specifically, yes, everyone talks about the boombox and all that, and the soundtrack is incredible. But the thing that like made my brain shift a little bit, well, number one, you can be weird and true to yourself and still get what you deserve in life. Like, he did not make himself less of a weirdo.
Correct. Much like Ducky.
And he knew what he wanted. And also, her life looked shiny and perfect on the outside. Not at all.
Okay, good.
So,
good.
like, everyone's weird. It's just not everyone shows it.
Facts.
Everyone has so much going on under the surface. But then at the end, when they're on the plane and she's so nervous, and he keeps saying, when that light goes on, that means we're like at a safe altitude. You can get up and roam around. I think at that point you could smoke on the plane then.
Oh, well, it was a different time.
But it's like, just listen for the ding. like when the ding happens, everything's going to be okay. And I honestly still use that when I travel. Like I have to get a certain distance away from my house, whether in a car or on the plane, where I'm just waiting for that ding. I'm waiting to be an hour away where it's too far to turn around and go back and get what you forgot, and then realize it's actually going to be okay. And I realize it would have been okay if I had realized that 5 minutes prior, but something about like that ding, like, okay, we're good.
You have a real answer. Like you did metaphors and shit.
Because I still think about that movie a lot every time I travel.
Is Say Anything a John Hughes movie?
Oh, is it Cameron Crowe?
Oh, the God, that would make Tyler so happy.
Oh, really?
He loves
I don't
him
know.
some Cameron Crowe. I'm trying to look it up. Oh, you're right. It's Cameron Crowe.
Yeah.
God, that really tracks. Mm-hmm. That tracks. As does John Hughes. All the John Hughes movies factored heavily into our adolescence. Heavily. And give me the formula all day long. I don't care. I'm not too fancy for it. I'm not too fancy for 16 Candles.
Well, no.
I'm not too fancy for any of that. Those movies were those were aspirational movies, and also always featured prominently, like with the little bit of a weirdo. Mm-hmm. The weirdo gets to still be weird, and that makes them special, not like rejectable. I mean, even though, oh my God, what's Blaine's name in real life? Blaine, the bad Blaine, the mean Blaine. You know who I'm saying right now.
Andrew McCarthy?
Oh my God. No, not the good one, the bad one, the mean one. Rich Blaine with the wealthy house, and he throws the parties and he wears like grown man suits.
Yes.
And like he smokes and he has like a little tumbler of bourbon. Like, who are these high schoolers?
Right.
Who are these high schoolers? What is going on here? What is going on in John Hughes's teenage world, in that they are having these like grown ass cocaine parties in their mansions?
It is Andrew McCarthy.
No. Is it?
I mean, if we're talking about Pretty in Pink and the rich guy who is mean.
No, that's not who I mean.
Oh, well, maybe it's a different movie.
It's not Pretty in Pink. It is, what's, the other. With
16 Candles? No,
I just found it. Hold on, I just found it.
James Spader.
There it is. Thank you. And the movie that I am thinking about is, you know what it is. God, why didn't I do my homework better?
Oh, it is Pretty in Pink.
No, that's not the one I'm thinking of. You're right, but I'll tell you what I am thinking of.
God bless Pepper and everything he has to edit out.
This is just why we have editing. Hold on. And she was a mechanic, and
some kind of wonderful.
Oh my God, that's what I want to talk about. Okay, sorry for editing. Here we go. I want to talk about Some Kind of Wonderful, and I want to tell you a little story.
Okay. God, that was a good one.
Oh my God. It came out when I was in 7th grade, and my very favorite babysitter, Amy Bowen, who was in high school. So she was both my babysitter and my aspirational person.
Yes.
Remember how you wanted to be a high schooler when you were in 7th grade? Mm-hmm. My very favorite babysitter, Amy Bowen, and her brother, Barry. This is the cutest story of my whole life. Went to go see Some Kind of Wonderful in the theater right when it came out. She loved it so much, and I'll never understand why she made this decision, but it's the cutest memory of my life. Loved it so much, they left the theater, they drove to my house and walked in the door and told Larry and Jana, my parents, please can you give us Jen? We need to take her to a movie.
What?
And they picked me up and put me in their car, and we turned right back around and went right back to the theater and watched the next showing of Some Kind of Wonderful. And we just sobbed. We just sobbed our way through the whole thing. And so not only did I see the best movie, truly just like the best movie, but like my babysitter thought I was special. My favorite babysitter. She didn't even go get her best friend. She came to get me. Make it make sense.
That's really sweet.
Isn't that cute?
Yes. Oh my gosh.
I'll never forget it. I'll just never forget it. Anyway, is that John Hughes?
Oh my gosh.
Let's find out.
You're testing me. I don't know.
Well, we're about to find out. This is 1987, guys.
Wow.
Let me see. I'm going to tell you that John Hughes,
Of
that
course.
bastard, he couldn't miss.
Randomly, and I'm not even kidding, I did not know we were going to talk about this, but 2 weeks ago, I added I Go Crazy by Flesh for Lulu
Oh, boy.
on my personal playlist.
Wow.
Just out of the blue, I was like, oh, what about that song? I loved that
How in
song.
the world did that come to your brain?
I don't know, but it's actually a great song.
Amazing. I'm going to just real quick for the listener, I'm just going to rip off a list of John Hughes movies, just in case you're not in the know, that he essentially built your adolescence. Okay. This is the reason you are the way you are. This is why we know what we know about the world. This is why we think what we think about romance and high school parties and transformation and prom. Okay.
Okay,
Because
go.
the movies that he has pulled off are 16 Candles, The Breakfast Club. Oh my God. Huge. Weird Science. Huge. Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, She's Having a Baby, Uncle Buck, National Lampoon's Vacation, Mr. Mom, come on,
Oh.
Pretty in Pink, Great Outdoors, Home Alone, Beethoven. This is a list of the favorite movies of my family. Anyway,
Yes, all
You-
on VHS.
you are the way you are because of John Hughes, listener. So,
And Molly Ringwald,
Mm-hmm.
a couple of years ago, revisited
Uh-huh.
16 Candles in particular, sort of the themes that we just didn't know what we didn't know.
yeah.
A lot of it wouldn't pass now.
Yeah,
She
for sure.
really thoughtfully went back and said, these are the great things
Uh-huh.
about this part of my career. And here's the things we can now
Do better.
talk about.
Uh-huh.
It's okay to talk about it and still be nostalgic.
That is so true.
Yeah.
Was that on a show? What was that on? I kind of remember seeing this.
I think it was written, but she maybe did some interviews about it also.
Okay. Also, a really fun fact is that when me and Tyler went to the U.S. Open in the last fall, because we were fancy tennis people for a day,
For one day?
Molly was there.
No.
Yeah, she was. And they showed her on the big screen, and everybody else, there was all kinds of other famous people there. And I'm like, oh, interesting. Oh, clap, clap, clap. But then Molly Ringwald comes on, and I'm like, oh, shit! She's really important to us. She's also the reason we are the way we are. Okay. That is a fun segment that we might need more time on, because there's
Maybe.
some other movies I want to talk about.
Okay.
Okay, but we got to get into this because we got a doozy for you today. Our guest today, I'm telling you, and I know it not just from experience, I know it because I had a front row seat to her story as well. She walked through the fire, and she has emerged stronger, better, wiser, smarter, and more resilient. We've got Jessica Turner on today, longtime friend of mine. She is a best-selling author. She is a speaker. She is just kind of a creative, generative powerhouse. And her new book, I Thought It Would Be Better Than This, is a must-read resource for absolutely anybody who has experienced loss, disappointment, heartbreak, or suffering around some relationship or story or space that you thought it was going to go one way and it's gone another. Her personal story of navigating her own heartbreak after her longtime husband, with whom they have 3 kids, came out as gay. And then finding her own identity inside of that and then rebuilding a life that she loves it's in one way it's deeply personal to her, but it's highly relatable to the rest of us. She's got a way with words and wisdom and warmth. And this book is very pragmatic. It is not just it's not just a memoir. It's every tool, every resource, everything that sort of pulled her out of the gutter, and she puts it in your hands. And if you are a human person, there will be so many parts of her story that you go, oh, me too, same. And this is going to be a resource for so many of us that are rebuilding and reimagining the second half of our lives. So let's get to it, and we will welcome Jessica Turner to the For the Love podcast. All right. Good morning to my dear friend. I'm so always delighted to talk to you, but so happy to see your face.
I'm so happy to see your face.
So happy.
And your face, Amy.
Hello.
My new friend.
Good morning.
And Amy's face.
So glad to meet you.
And let's go ahead and just make very quick mention of the beautiful book cover, since it is so large and over your shoulder.
Yes,
Like,
I'll give you a little one right here.
big, little. It's so beautiful. I love it.
It is.
How many iterations of covers did you have to go through before you got that one?
A lot. I think it was 5 or 6 rounds.
Yeah.
It was really important to me how it felt literally from the moment you pick up this book that we're addressing something hard, brokenness. You see a broken rose and it taped together, but it's also somehow still beautiful. And I think that's my story. That's a lot of our listeners' stories. And it's the hope that I'm hoping to give in this book as people read it.
You're 100% right. It's everybody's story. I mean, at our age, by the time you have gotten to this stage of life, I don't know anybody who hasn't been through a round of really heavy disappointment that couldn't also say, I thought it was going to be better than this. Mm-hmm. But I mean, pick a category. It's not just like your particular, I'm getting ahead of myself. I am putting the cart before the horse. Back it up. All right. Let's start with your particular framework, what you sort of hung meat on these bones. And then we'll talk more about how this story is more than just the one lane, that is actually useful for anybody who thought something was going to be better than it is.
Well, I think that's so interesting you say that, Jen, because before my big disappointment happened in my life, which was after 16 years of marriage, my husband came out, and this was during the pandemic, and everything that I thought my life would be changed. I thought this was the man I was going to grow old with, sit at weddings with. We had have 3 kids, and nothing about what I thought my life was going to be is my life now.
Yep.
And prior to that, my life had been pretty dang great. My parents were divorced. I've lost a few grandparents, but I wouldn't say that I had this catastrophic disappointment where I could really appreciate grief and loss and disappointment and dismay like I can now. Now I feel like I walk around in the world and I feel it from everybody. It's amazing how my eyes have opened. I don't know if you feel that way kind of in your own story, but for me, it was a pretty big awakening. It was like my eyes were no longer covered by how much loss people are walking around with every day.
Oh my gosh. Once you have suffered at those levels, that you develop vision for it, and just it's like an antenna grows right out of your head, and you're able to spot it behind people's tight smiles and their shorter answers and their body language and their facial expressions. And it's just so vivid at that point that we can kind of see each other's pain. I wonder if you could you talk a little bit more? I mean, you touched on it with one sentence. Here was my disappointment. Could you build out a little capacity around your particular story so people know, okay, this is where we're starting from, and then we'll drill down into some of the things that you write about.
So for me, when Matthew came out, we had what seemed to be like this picture perfect marriage. We both had big online platforms, and it was very much from the outside, everyone thought everything was just fine. And when we made the decision to announce our divorce, for him to come out publicly, the floodgates kind of opened, and I was starting from the rock bottom. I have described it as I felt like I was sitting on the floor of hell. Like everything was dust. Everything was different, from adjusting to just not having my kids 24/7 to eventually starting to date, to also my business. I had been a blogger and writer since 2006, but always had a full-time corporate job. And I remember my friend Angie saying to me, Jess, the dream of your marriage died. We are not letting this other dream die. And so I left that corporate job and the stability and the 401k
Yeah.
and the amazing healthcare benefits, and did all of this kind of at once. I met
right.
Matthew when I was 20. I feel like you and your story, you know, I was a grown up only ever with Matthew. And so there was a lot of growth and development that happened when I became solely in myself and with only myself. Being the only companion I had in the world was myself. And I wrote, I thought it would be better than this, because as I would talk with people about what happened, that was the phrase that came to me. I remember saying it for the first time out loud, probably 2 years after the divorce, saying, gosh, I thought it would be better than this. And our mutual friend Lisa saying, that's it. That's your book title. That's what we all feel. And so that's what I set out to write, what we all feel, to give language to it for people, because I think it's one of those statements that we're afraid to say out loud, but a lot of us feel. And so I started writing. Once I got a first draft written, I did focus groups with other people with a wide array of disappointments, from health to finances to relationships to loneliness to parenting, to make sure that it met them where they were at. And universally, everyone cried, and everyone was like, yep, me too.
Totally.
This is how I feel.
You write about naming your pain and your unmet expectations as a first step. So how can our listeners sort of start that process? Like, after they say and admit, I thought it would be better than this, what's the first step after that?
You have to name what this is. And then you have to recognize, in the book, I have a little drawing of a bike wheel with all those spokes. You have to recognize the fullness of the scope of this. So if I were to fill out that bike wheel and say, I thought marriage would be better than this, then all of the spokes would come off of that. From, what does that mean? So if I thought marriage was going to be better than this, I thought parenting would be better than this, because I would be parenting with another person 24/7. I thought managing a house would be better than this, because I wouldn't be doing it by myself. I thought finances would be better than this, because I would have 2 finances in the bank account instead of just one person's, whatever those are. And so it's naming not just the immediate thing, but everything around it is really the first step. And I think when you do that, it helps give you clarity and language for what you're really dealing with.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I wasn't just dealing with the loss of my marriage. I wasn't just dealing with losing Matthew as my husband and partner, but I was actually dealing with a lot of loss, a lot of new things. And I think when you sit with the fullness of this, then you can get clarity for how to move forward.
Yeah, that's huge. You and I, of course, went through the losses of our marriage almost at the identical time. And we were deep in each other's stories. The Jen that you called on page 2 was me. And so even though we lost our marriages for different reasons, we lost them nonetheless. During the pandemic, there was so much that we understood about each other in real time. Because there is a different sense of understanding in hindsight, which beautifully you and I have emerged. We are coming up on 5 years of recovery and rebuilding. But we were doing this at the same time, where everything is just disastrous and dark and fuzzy and complicated and confusing. Nothing's clear. And so I know this personally about you, and you know it about me. But during that season of loss and then the slow climb back out of it, what would you say? And there's so many. I know this list is long. So if you were going to just pick the top section, What did you learn about yourself during that season that you wouldn't trade for 20 zillion dollars?
I think the first one is that I am whole on my own. And what's so interesting is if you have known me for a long time, I'm an Enneagram 8. I'm kind of that born leader, happy to speak what I think. I don't know that you would have looked at 25, 30, 35-year-old Jessica and been like, oh, she doesn't feel like she's whole on her own. But I had so much of my identity wrapped up in being a wife, in being Matthew's, in wanting to know his opinions on everything, and that informing the way in which I moved in the world, that was one of the biggest lessons I think that I came away with, that I am whole on my own. And I think tied to that is also the idea of worthiness. And I think worthy has become a bit of a buzzword, but for me, being married to someone who was gay and not knowing that he was, and really not having any sexual experience outside of my husband, and own that his desire or lack of desire was all I knew. And I tied that up a lot with my body image, my identity, my worthiness of being loved. And that is something that had to be completely rewired for me. And I think that's so interesting because I would say that I've always been a confident person, but actually in that area, that was a huge growth point for me. I'm going to share this one story real quick from the book that you might remember. I did a huge kitchen and dining room remodel after my divorce. I stayed in the house that Matthew and I had, but it's kind of a totally new house. And when we were doing that remodel, the contractor pulled down some crown molding that was in my dining room that was very pretty, but it didn't really match the vibe I was going for. And we found a bunch of exposed wires. And the man who had lived in the house had just put those wires in and then hid them with the molding, which is not great. And the contractor said, this was a real fire hazard. You're really lucky you didn't ever have anything go wrong. You could have had a fire. And I equated that to kind of in my own life, wiring that had been put up a way that
poorly.
The lights were working.
Yeah.
In fact, when you were in the room and the lights were on, it was really beautiful. And to look into my marriage and my life, it looked really beautiful. But actually, just hidden behind this thin piece of wood, there was a fire hazard, and new wiring, tearing down had to happen, and new wiring had to be installed. And I'll say, I've been dating a man for a while now, and I'll say, sorry, I still need some rewiring on that. And it's just the language that I've given to, this is something I'm still working on, that I'm still realizing those wires weren't put in right and I need to fix.
Totally.
So I think those are two that come to mind right off the bat. And then the last thing is, and I hope that this is hopeful for people listening too, is that the only thing that was going to prevent me from rising after this was me.
Yeah.
Was
this
me.
is a big truth, capital T. I hope everybody can hear it.
I firmly believe this, no matter your circumstances, no matter your resources. So much of that is just right in your head, what you believe is possible, can be possible, what you can dream for yourself. All of that was in me. I could stay bitter and angry, or I could forgive and I could heal and I could invest in therapy. And I had to do those things only for myself. And I think so often when people face disappointment, they're like, this is what happened to me, period. Instead of this is what happened to me, comma, and this is what I did.
That's right.
And this is what I learned. And this is what I want. And this book is that comma, I think.
In the book, you talk about imperfect choices and how they can still lead to growth and healing, about not letting perfect be the enemy of good. Can you unpack what that looked like in your growth and healing process?
Yeah, this was something that a friend shared with me. And the idea was we were trying to figure out at first, Matthew told me he was bi, then he came out. And he came out to me in September, and it wasn't until the following June that he moved out. Okay, so
Yeah.
there was a long season. And so September, he comes out to me. March, the world closes with COVID.
That's right.
And then June, he moved out. That's the timeline of this. And I wrestled, and Matthew wrestled with this idea of, do we stay married? We both loved each other. We were our good parents, and there was a lot of life that we thought we, would want to do together. And that was one possibility, have a mixed orientation marriage. We were still, faithful with one another. Or do we get divorced, which is its own set of challenges then for us. Matthew gets to live out fully who he is and explore that and feel freedom in that. I start over, but potentially would find love with somebody who, was fully attracted to me as a woman, and none of those choices seemed good.
Yeah.
They
Bad,
were both
bad.
imperfect.
Which one do I pick?
Which bad, in your choose your own adventure book, which one do I want? And I think that's what so much of life is. Like, there is no one perfect choice that's going to just be sunshine and unicorns and rainbows. And so sometimes it's writing down or thinking through, okay, these are my two imperfect choices. Which one am I going to pick? And ultimately we landed on the one that we felt had less suffering in the long run, because staying married, maybe there wasn't as much suffering for our kids. Maybe, we don't know what life was going to continue to look like, but there would be so much suffering for both of us individually once that genie was out of the bottle that it wasn't sustainable.
That's right.
Yeah.
That was like a short-term comfort, but would have been like a long-term agony. You made the right choice, obviously. But at the time, it's never quite that clear. And it's helpful for people to know that. Like, when we get to sort of analyze our stories in hindsight, it's always a scotch clearer than it was at the time. At the time, it's murky. And that's normal for anybody listening going, oh, I just feel like I'm getting yanked around this way and that way. I feel this way today. I feel that way tomorrow. Normal. That's just normal. There's like a season of pain and then the early stages of recovery that are just disorienting. And so I think you do a really honest job of including that in your book. This doesn't have the sanitized version of happily ever after. Sometimes we get a story from beyond, from over the hill, from recovery, and it has forgotten how hard it was and how dark it felt and how confusing it sometimes was. And so I think you do a really beautiful job of including that under that umbrella, your concept of releasing unmet expectations is actually very liberating. It's very freeing because that is a place a lot of women get stuck. We had an expectation, it is unmet, but the releasing of that is sometimes where people live the rest of their life if they're unable to do it. So I'd like to hear you talk about that a little bit, that process and what you learned.
Unmet expectations, I think, go hand in hand with disappointment. If you are facing a great disappointment or grief or loss, there is something that you yearned for that you are not going to experience. And recognizing that and then letting it go is so important. In the book, I talk about the idea of having a funeral for my marriage. And it was something that I was talking about with my therapist. And I said, I feel like when I think about my marriage and what's happened, I'm looking at a battlefield. I love the show Outlander. And I think about like those Scottish battlefields where there's just like bodies and smoke and blood. And like, that's what it felt like all of these expectations of what my life was supposed to look like. And so I wrote a eulogy for that life that I was no longer going to have, and really made peace with that wasn't going to be my story. I'm not going to have the greatest love story that includes, holding hands in the Notebook and taking my last breath with my husband of 60 years. That's not going to be my story. I'm at peace with that now. But there was a long time where I wasn't at
Yeah.
peace with it. That was what I wanted. I wanted that fairy tale. And I think that it is important to acknowledge it and then take a breath, metaphorically or physically, and step into the possibility of what is next for your life. Because the truth is, now, 5 years later, I am being loved by somebody in a way that I never imagined possible, ever. And if I had stayed in a place of wanting what I had, I would not have been able to move forward to be loved and to love in the way that I'm experiencing now. And so releasing those unmet expectations is a way of experiencing freedom and growth
right.
and possibility in your life that will, without question, change your entire life.
100%.
Yeah. In the book, you give a lot of practical tools of how to rebuild. I love that over and over you sort of take a blank sheet of paper and your pen, even under a really heavy blanket of grief and confusion, and you can always make a list, a pro-con list, steps to take just that day or that moment. If we have a listener at rock bottom right now, like what is a small step, a tool they can use to start to get out from under that heavy blanket that's obscuring everything?
I'm going to give two, if I may.
may.
One
Yeah.
that's a pen to paper tool and one other one. So pen to paper, I think doing that exercise that we talked about at the beginning of the podcast of identifying you are feeling at rock bottom. Maybe you thought your marriage was going to be better. Maybe you thought your work was going to be better. Maybe you thought parenting was going to be better. Maybe you are struggling with something related to your health or a family member's health situation, whatever that thing is, write that this. And then I want you just to start doing those spokes of, as I'm struggling with this, I thought this would be better. What else did I think was going to be better? Once you have done that exercise, I want to encourage you to talk to one person. And that one person might be a therapist. It might be that you schedule a call with a therapist, but it might be a friend. It might be your Jen in your life. And you reach out to them and you say the thing out loud, because once you say that, you will experience the freedom of truth telling that comes. There will be a pit in your stomach to say that thing. Jen, I will never forget, and I know you won't either, the day I first called you.
I mean,
and
neither. I
told
was in
you
the
what going
Walmart
on.
parking lot and I just put my car in park and I think I sat there for an hour in my car.
Yeah. I was in the parking lot at my kid's school because I couldn't be at home to tell you the thing. This was way before anyone knew.
That's right.
I had to identify who was safe enough that I could tell this thing to, and that they weren't going to be a burden once they knew.
Exactly.
For me, it would have been too difficult for my family to know that Matthew had come out and said he was bi, and then had come out and said he was gay. They would have been reeling in
right.
such a way that I would have had to carry their pain too, and I could barely carry my own.
Yeah.
But I knew that you were strong enough and safe enough to know these truths. And so identify who is safe
Yeah.
to tell your story to and let them in. You are going to feel so much better.
It's real.
I had so much relief every time I let somebody in.
Yep.
And I think about that time, and it was such a small group for so long. And the way those women, I said I was not going to cry here, but
Yeah.
the way those women carried me when I couldn't carry myself got me through. And chances are there's someone listening today that feels like my thing is too big for anyone to know. And I know what that feels like because to have a husband who's a children's book author who it's in the Christian space, being gay feels like a really big thing for anyone to know. And to have a marriage that people comment on all the time as being so amazing, and you might blow the whole thing up. You are right on the brink of that. I know what that feels like. And I also know that telling people is the single best thing I did, and especially in those early days.
Yeah, there's no way to overstate that piece of it. What that does for you internally and relationally, the strength of it, the taking away some of its power, just by virtue of not keeping it in the dark, is profound. For me, that is 50%, honestly. That gets you from 0 to 50% immediately. That next 50% is a slog. It is a slog, and you did it. And you talk pretty honestly about it, that there's some false starts in there. And I so appreciate, because I was with you during all these, that you included some of the false starts in dating, that you just don't immediately go, okay, now I have a new set of operating rules and I will follow them perfectly. Like, that's just not necessarily how it works. And so I'd like to hear you talk a little bit about sort of that messy section of rebuilding imperfectly.
I think it is very difficult when you are rebuilding to feel strong enough to start, because you have felt so much sorrow and gone through so much that, man, like, now I have to do this hard work of rebuilding. And so I think starting small and kind of building that scaffolding for me was really helpful. If we talk specifically about dating, it is, I think, the only time in my therapeutic journey that my therapist was like, it's time. Like, she was no longer going to let me just sit and hem and haw, but she was like, yep, let me give you just a little push. You need to do that. And I think that is, again, where having community really is helpful, but it's in a different way when you're rebuilding. It's
That's right.
it's a cheerleading
That's
instead
exactly
of a
right.
soothing, right? That's happening. And another story that involves you, Jen, I'll never forget. I'd been dating for a couple years and was dating someone that I thought I loved. I thought maybe this one is the guy. We had a lot of chemistry, and there had been, though, some things that were red flags. And if somebody is listening and they're dating, I think the biggest lesson is small red flags don't get smaller,
That's right.
And so I had already seen this flag, and we had an argument, and he started yelling and swearing at me. And I very calmly said to him, I love myself more than I love you, and I will not be talked to that way.
That's right.
And I remember hanging up the phone, and I might have called you that day, the next day, and been like, Jen, look at what I said. And then I believe this to be true. And it was just such a big moment for me, being like, yeah, I do. I think in the past, I would have been like, oh, he was having a bad day.
Totally.
It's okay.
Yeah.
And now I was like, hell
Absolutely
no.
not.
This is not something that's going to ever be acceptable. And so that rising, he wasn't the guy. We ended up breaking up, but that rising that was happening and me seeing that growth happening was like fuel on the fire for this growth and this rebuilding into creating a life that I really loved, even though the life that I have that I really love now is not the life that I had that I loved, that I imagined life would be.
That's right.
And that's okay.
It is okay.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear you talk a little bit, because you discuss in your book the possibility of bringing in counselors, therapists, therapeutic environments, people for whom this is their life's work, and they are able to provide a little bit of structure in which we like hang our recovery. You know, of course, that was so important to me too. Therapy just was a lifeline for me when in the middle of the ocean. And you spent like an extended period of time on site. And I wonder, you write about this in the book too. I'd love to hear what you learned there and why that mattered, why you're glad that's a piece of the story, for people who maybe have an impulse to not reach out to professionals in any way, whether that's a financial planner or a counselor or a doctor, whatever, to sort of help pull us forward. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, I'd love to. And I think my therapeutic journey is really interesting because I had all sorts of therapists during the past few years. I actually started at a place that was with therapists in training. Matthew and I didn't have budget for $200 an hour when I was going and he was going and we both were going. And we went to this place that I think was like $60 an hour.
Yeah.
And it was amazing and exactly what we needed. And so I also want to encourage people who feel like finances are prohibitive, that there are options that are really affordable for therapy. I did that for a long time. And then actually after that big blow up and that relationship ended of the I love myself more than I love you, I was like, you know what? There's still some stuff that seems to be cyclical that's happening in these dating relationships that I think I need some other tools. I want to try something different. And so I went to a program at Onsite that was 6 days, and they say that 6 days there is the equivalent of 8 months of therapy. And it was just a deep dive into working through some things that still needed to be excavated in my own story. There were no phones, no TV, no devices of any kind. I was completely involved in this healing modality that was extremely helpful for me. In fact, it was so profoundly life-changing and eye-opening for me that I went to Onsite after I finished this book and said to them, they're based here. Onsite's a world-renowned therapeutic program. They've got locations in Nashville and in California. And I said, hey, can we create a course for everyone who gets this book that guides them through disappointment with one of your therapists? And so we created a 5-part video series on disappointment with their clinical director. It's amazing. Everyone who buys the book gets that for free. And I love that there's this video therapeutic education that goes along with this book, because I think it's so helpful and so life-changing to have excellence in helping people move through things that you get in therapy in our healing journeys. And I think it's something that we all need. We all need it.
Absolutely. The amount of times I took something that my therapist said to me in a session and brought it to my like online community. I'm like, here, this is free. I already paid for it. This cost us $150 an hour, you guys. You get it for nothing. And those voices from an expertise space of just therapeutic recovery. Well, I don't know what I'd have done without it. That is, and also I think that's such an important thing to just include, because therapists don't put up with your bullshit. Like, they're not here for it. They're not here to let you like spiral in a victim narrative. They're not here to let you repeat unhealthy patterns, because we've got some ownership in any relationship. I don't care how it went down. You know, if we were in a relationship, then we have skin in that game. And there's a high chance we did not do that relationship perfectly. And so my therapist was the one who was like, okay, great. What we're going to do is we're going to hold up a mirror to you and let's look at you. And I was like, well, I don't want to. That's not why I'm paying you. I'm paying you to look at him and tell me why I deserve better than this.
That's right.
They're very, very frustrating in that way, the therapists. And so
I brought this big, one of those huge Post-it pads to therapy one day, and I wanted to evaluate every relationship I had been in. And so we put Matthew's name on there. We put all these different guys' names on that held some weight in my story over the past few years. And she said, okay, now let's also put a sheet up there for you. Let's put your name on one of those.
They're the worst.
Yeah.
Oh, they're
what are
the
the
worst.
patterns? Yep.
Awful.
Yikes. Okay, well, what is next for you? What's on the horizon? Where is this journey taking you?
Well, I think what is immediate is just this book getting out into the world. I feel so energized and excited for people to start reading and sharing their story. I'm excited to do more speaking in the coming months around this as well. I think that vulnerability brings forth more vulnerability, which brings forth healing for
Every
people.
time.
And so I'm so excited to just be continuing to have conversations around this. I also love to travel, so I'm excited for whatever my next big trip is going to be. So I'm
Always.
thinking through what that will be. We went to New Zealand in February, and so now we're thinking through what are we going to do this summer. I don't know if we can beat New Zealand, but I'm excited for that. I think those are kind of the immediate things, like just finally getting to help people. I've been sitting behind a computer by myself thinking about all the ways that this is going to help people, and so I'm really excited to get out there and talk to people and hug people and share this with the
Love
world.
it.
Nice.
What's on your short list for travel destinations?
Alaska.
Yeah. Have you
On
been?
the list? I've not been.
Dreamy.
So I took the kids on a Disney cruise last spring. And it is, I think, their favorite trip ever. I think they don't want to say it's their favorite trip because Matthew wasn't with them, and they feel a little guilty saying like that was their favorite.
But it was.
But I was talking about like what would be a fun thing to do this summer, and they were like, "Let's go on another cruise. Let's go on another cruise."
yeah.
I'm like, I don't want to do the Caribbean in the summer. That feels very hot. So Alaska is something we thought about. We've never gone all the way up the East Coast. I've been wanting to go to Maine since you went to Maine for me camp. So maybe an East Coast like road trip. I don't know.
I love
I
this.
subscribe to Going. Do you guys use Going?
What is it?
No.
Oh my gosh, it's a $50 spend that's going to change your life. So they send
gonna open a
cheap
tab
flight
right now.
deals and mistake fares out. It's like how we have traveled so much. So we got flights to New Zealand for over 50% off because Going sent a thing. You have to be willing to go somewhere you weren't planning.
Oh, like be flexible?
You have to be kind of flexible. Like, oh, I didn't know that I wanted to go to Portugal, but it's only $350. So let's go to Portugal this summer. So like
I
that could
see.
still happen too.
I'm looking at it right now.
That's how
Wow.
we went to Paris. We went to Paris last summer during the Olympics. And we got ridiculously cheap flights. And it was because they sent something out. So I'm also just open to
I like this.
Nice.
whatever could be.
I like this.
So that's I think what I'm thinking
Just
about here
let
for this coming
everybody
month.
listening like log it that really and truly, no matter how devastating the loss, and it can be shattering, like literally shattering, it can shatter it all to pieces. Not a minor inconvenience, like a full scorched earth scenario. Even then, even especially then, the life that you can still rebuild is astonishing. I mean, it's truly astonishing what you learn about yourself if you're willing to do the work. It doesn't just come naturally to you. You included a quote that I really liked, and I don't remember who said it or what it is, but it was essentially like, loss doesn't immediately mean transformation. It just kind of sets the table for the possibility of transformation if you're willing to move into that direction. Because some people kind of say, suffering equals growth. Well, it doesn't necessarily.
No.
You can stay stuck. You can stay mad. You can stay sad. You can stay bitter. But it does give you a unique opportunity to grow and change and evolve and build something you never even knew was possible. You and I are living proof. We are. We are living proof. And it's such a hard thing to say because that's not necessarily comforting in someone's exact moment of suffering. But I remember, and you probably do too, Jess, people ahead of us with some sort of similar story, if not identical, at least similar, saying to us, keep going. Like, you are going to get there. We promise you. Look at all of us over here. We all made it over the mountain. You're going to make it over the mountain. Like, we'll hold up a lantern for you. Like, just keep going. And it is true. It is so true. So for the people at the bottom of the mountain, this is a lantern. Just look that you can get there.
If there wasn't a broken rose on the cover of this book, I think a lantern could be on the cover of this book.
right.
That's what I hope that this is a light for people when they feel hopeless, when they feel sorrow, when it just feels like it is never going to get better.
Yeah.
It is never going to change. Nobody can understand where I am. You and I don't know their exact story, but you and I know what it's like to lick the floor of hell.
Sure do.
We do. And make something out of dust that is extremely beautiful, that's full of so much joy.
Yeah.
I say all the time now, I didn't know it could be like this.
That's right.
I could not have an imagination for a life as beautiful as what I am living right now.
It's just crazy.
I could not imagine so much color and light in my life.
Yeah.
I thought oh, maybe I won't be alone someday. Oh, it's not going to feel quite this bad.
Yeah.
And I still have scars that I'll
Sure.
always have. There will always be times that I cry. I don't think I'll ever think of that day that I called you and said he's gay, that I won't cry.
Yeah.
It will always be hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that my life isn't beautiful, and that you listening, that your life
right.
can't be more beautiful than you can imagine today.
100%.
One thing you said in the book that just put me on the floor was so simple. You said your imagination rarely gets it right. And in the beginning, you were talking about the terribleness,
The what ifs.
like the creating the terrible narratives of what is going to happen. Your imagination rarely gets that right, but also your imagination rarely gets the good stuff right either, because you can't imagine how good it can be.
That's right.
Like it will unfold in a way that is better than you could ever dream of.
It's true.
It is true.
It's true. And it's a good message. And so as we sign off here, can you tell our community the best place to not just get your book, but get the on-site resource that you created and just follow along the whole journey, where to follow you on socials, all the good things, so that they can grab onto the fullness of what you've done here?
Thank you. Yes. So you can get the book wherever books are sold. So wherever you like to buy books, I'm sure you all will link it, whether it's a big store like Amazon or Target, or you want to shop your local indies, please support those indie bookstores. You can get the book everywhere. And you can find out more information at my website, jessicannturner.com. Do not miss the N, because jessicaturner.com is a
Not
porn
it.
site.
It's
just not it, guys.
Did you say it's a porn site?
It is.
Amazing. Okay.
Yeah, it's great. So don't miss the N,
N matters.
jessicannturner.com. And then Instagram is where I like to spend most of my time on social media. And that's just my name, Jessica N. Turner. So I hope people will reach out, say hello, and connect with me there and get this book. And you know what? If you are in a season where you don't have great grief, great disappointment, I'm so thankful that you are there. I know that you can be that friend to somebody else in your life.
right.
I know that there's someone else in your life that probably needs this. And so think about who that might be, and just go and order the book and send it to them with a little note. Hey, I'm thinking about you. I heard this podcast. I think there might be something here for you, and love on somebody that way.
Love it. Okay. I love you.
I love you.
Proud of you. I must have written that to you this morning 100 times. Proud of you. Proud of you. The way that you lived your story, the way that you told the truth, and now the way that you're using it for great good. Everything can be used. It's crazy alchemy. It's just bananas. And so I'm thankful that you're willing to use your own pain to serve other people. That's just who you are. That's in your character. But beautiful to see. And so everybody, we will round up all these links for you. You don't have to search them out. We got you. We'll put them below. And this is an exciting time. So we are just I'm just cheering for you, with my pom-poms, and excited to see how this book serves people. And it will. And it will.
I'm so
Okay.
excited for it to do that.
Love you.
Love you.
As promised, let us round all this up for you. I don't want you to miss any of these resources. Head over to jenhatmaker.com under the podcast tab, and we'll have this episode, of course, and all the show notes, but we'll also round up all these links to Jessica's website, so you can download the free resource with your pre-order or with your order of a book. We'll put links to the book, to her socials. There's just so much here for you to kind of hook into, and you'll be glad that you did. I'm so grateful for the people that went ahead of me and held up lanterns. That was a huge portion of my journey, and this could be a portion of yours. And so thank you for being here. Thanks to my friend Jessica for her candor and her honesty and her vulnerability. And I already know this is going to serve so many of you. So glad you're here. We have more incredible episodes to come, and we will see you next week. Bye, everybody.